What if time was never your enemy? What if everything you now call a delay is actually a rare kind of preparation? We spend our lives pushing through the days, barely noticing, until suddenly the silence weighs more than any noise. And then comes that question so many hide after turning 50. Is there still time? But that question, whispered through clenched teeth after 50, carries more than doubt. It carries exhaustion. It carries longing for oneself. It carries a quiet guilt that accumulates like dust on the furniture in a house where hardly anyone enters anymore. It's not that you don't want to start over. It's that sometimes it feels like the train has already left. And all that's left is the cold platform, the empty tracks, and the memory of who you could have been. You look back and try to count the years. Try to find a breaking point, that exact moment when you lost yourself. But time doesn't leave such visible traces. It slips away. It slips away in the mirror that no longer reflects the same energy. It slips away in the clothes that now feel looser or tighter. It slips away in the message that no one replied to. But even when everything seems to have passed, there's a breath, a pause, a moment that almost no one notices, but that can change everything. Because the truth is, time doesn't announce when it starts to heal. It just goes quiet and waits for you to notice. And in that silence, life whispers, you're still here, so there's still a chance. There's a kind of courage that is born when the world no longer expects anything from you. A courage that doesn't scream. A courage that doesn't need a stage. A courage that rises in the middle of the night, walks to the mirror, and even with eyes marked by yesterday says, "Today, I'm going to try again." This new beginning doesn't need to be heroic. It doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need to be understood by anyone. It only needs to be yours. And if you've made it this far, with so much life still in your chest, it's because some part of you, even if small, even if wounded, still wants to bloom. So listen closely. You still have time, real time, time that doesn't depend on the calendar, time that begins now, if you allow it. There are birthdays that don't hurt because of the age. They hurt because when you blow out the candles, what comes to mind isn't wishes, but absences, lack of time, lack of courage, lack of someone. You're there, in front of the cake, surrounded by voices and smiles, but something tightens in your chest, as if each lit candle reminds you of everything that wasn't lived, of all the times you wanted to, but didn't, dreamed, but postponed, felt, but hid. And what was meant to be a celebration turns into a strange kind of mourning, mourning for who you could have been. No one notices this silence, because it doesn't scream. It simply fills the space. It fills the body. It fills the distant gaze. It fills the half-hearted laugh. It's in that moment that a sensation appears, one that few have the courage to name, the feeling of being stuck at a station where everyone else has already boarded. You see others going, see the kids growing up, friends moving to new cities, colleagues accomplishing projects you didn't even have time to start. And you stayed. Stayed taking care of others. Stayed holding up what needed to collapse. Stayed waiting for, at some point, someone to say, "Go. Now it's your turn." But no one said it. And maybe that's why that cursed phrase echoes so much inside you, whispered by guilt, repeated by fear. If only I had started earlier. How many times has that phrase pierced your chest like a silent dagger? If I had started earlier, I wouldn't be here. If I had made that choice, my life would be different now. If I hadn't been so afraid. These phrases are heavy because they're not just words. They're snapshots of time you feel you've lost, even if you can't quite explain how. But what if that feeling of the last day is actually the first? The first of a new time that doesn't come from rushing, but from truth. Because there's a huge difference between giving up and stopping to breathe. Sometimes the body stops, the soul goes quiet, but it's in the silence that the biggest decisions ripen. The last day of giving up can be the first day of transformation, not because everything will suddenly change, but because you chose not to abandon yourself. And that silent choice, changes everything. You're still here, and that alone is more than enough to start again. Few things are as damaging as looking to the side and thinking you've fallen behind. It doesn't matter how much you've lived, how much you've already faced. If, when looking at someone else, you believe they got there before you, a silent poison starts to seep inside. That poison is called comparison. And it doesn't hurt just because the other has more money, success, vitality. It hurts because deep down, it makes you believe that your time has passed, that life forgot you, that you came last. And that's where the mistake lies. You haven't fallen behind. You've simply walked a different path, with other stones, other curves, other pauses. But we forget that when other people's applause makes more noise than our own inner calling, when everyone seems to be achieving, creating, growing, and you're just trying to keep your head above water, it's hard to believe there's still room for you to bloom. It feels like your time has expired. But time doesn't expire. It only waits to be acknowledged. Your moment was never the same as others. It never will be. And when you accept that, not as an excuse, but as an intimate truth, a strange peace begins to grow. A peace that comes from the body, from silence, from the breath that slows down. It's the peace of someone who has finally stopped running a race that was never theirs. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your story isn't a stage. It's a garden, and every garden has its time to bloom. Maybe yours is still germinating beneath the soil, where no one can see, but that doesn't mean it's stagnant. It means it's getting ready. Reconnecting with this internal rhythm is a daily gesture, an almost sacred gesture. Sometimes all you need is to close your eyes for a moment and ask yourself, honestly, what is possible for me today? Not for the world, not for expectations, but for you. And maybe the answer is simple. One step, one breath, one begin. Because life doesn't demand haste, it demands presence. And what if the time you think you've lost was exactly the time that prepared you for now? Maybe what seemed like delay was wisdom in the making. And maybe you're not behind at all. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be to finally start walking your way, in your own time, on your own ground. There are days when all you need is for someone to listen, without rushing, without trying to fix you, without interrupting, without comparing you to anyone, just listening. Because when someone listens with presence, it's as if they're saying, even without words, you still matter. Aye, and that phrase, spoken through the silence of an attentive gaze, can revive a part of you that was almost giving up. Hope, more often than not, doesn't return like a ray of sunshine. It returns like a light breeze, almost imperceptible, in a gesture, in an encounter, in a detail that only those paying close attention notice. Sometimes it comes during a solitary walk. At first, it just seems like a way to get out of the house, to stretch your body, to escape the emptiness. But little by little, that walk begins to return you to yourself. The sound of your footsteps, the wind on your face, the smell of the trees, or the wet pavement. Everything slowly reminds your body that it's still alive. And then, without even realizing, you start to feel your own rhythm, to realize that maybe you don't need so much, nor everyone, just a little more of yourself. There's beauty in the small routines that no one sees. Making a coffee, making the bed, lighting a candle. They're small gestures, almost invisible, but full of intention. Because what sustains a tired soul isn't grand events. It's the quiet details that say, I still take care of myself. And when you allow yourself that care, even if brief, even if shy, inner doors begin to open. Doors that have been closed for years. Doors that lead to old dreams, to forgotten desires, to versions of yourself that were left along the way. Maybe it all starts with a small habit. 10 minutes a day for you to return inward. 10 minutes to write down what you feel. 10 minutes to listen to a song that reminds you of who you were before the exhaustion. 10 minutes of presence. Because when you give yourself that time, even if the world is rushing outside, something starts to bloom within. And where there was once only survival, life begins to grow again. There are cycles in life that refuse to be born before their time. They wait. They wait for the soul to mature, for the body to settle, for the heart to accept that not every flower belongs to spring. Some fruits only arrive when the roots have already sunk deep enough to support what's coming. But we live surrounded by calendars, by goals, by alarms that signal urgency. And then, without realizing it, we start measuring life like someone measuring an expiry date, as if everything had to happen early, as if the worth of a story depended on how much it happened in time. Eh? But what is the right time? Who decided that what blooms at 60 is worth less than what bloomed at 30? The mistake lies in judging life by the calendar, because some people only find love after losing everything. Some only discover their talent after the world goes silent. Some only bloom out of season, and those flowers are rare. They are the ones that endured the cold without withering, the ones that didn't follow anyone else's clock, the ones that, even ignored, chose to blossom in their own way, in their own time. Ruben Alves used to say that time is not the enemy, it's the ally. And he was right, because time, when well lived, doesn't take away, it polishes. It strips away the excess, clears up the mistakes, sharpens the desires. And then, one day, without warning, you realize that you're ready. Ready in a way that only now would be possible. Not because you've become better, but because you've become whole. Whole in your losses, in your silences, in your choices that no longer need to please anyone. You are not late. You are in full bloom. Time doesn't go back, but you can return to yourself at any moment. And sometimes, that moment is all that life was waiting for to finally bloom within you. Sometimes all it takes is a smell, an old photograph, a song forgotten at the back of your memory, and suddenly something awakens, as if a part of you, asleep for decades, whispers, "I'm still here." It's strange to recognize an old dream when it reappears in the middle of your routine, as if it's saying, "You didn't kill me. You just silenced me." It survived the years, the urgencies of others, the imposed priorities, the forced pauses. It stayed there, in a corner of your heart, waiting for you to have time or courage. And now, perhaps for the first time, you have both. Because starting over isn't going back to the starting point. It's not trying to be who you were. It's taking everything you've already lived to another place. It's walking with what stayed, with the pain, with the stumbles, with the lessons that didn't come from books but from losses. Starting over after 50 isn't naivety. It's wisdom. It's knowing that you've already tried many ways, but that there is still a version of you that was never fully lived. And it's waiting for your gaze of acceptance, waiting for you to stop blaming yourself, waiting for you, instead of saying, "My time has passed," to say, "Now is my time." There is a deep tenderness in this reunion, as if, finally, you extended your hand to that part of you that was forgotten on some street corner of your youth, and said, "Come, I see you, and I'm ready to take you with me." Writing a letter to yourself can be a powerful symbolic ritual, not to dwell on what didn't work out, but to record what can still bloom. From here on, a letter without guilt, without demands, just presence. Words written not to impress, but to set free. And at the end of it, a name, yours, signed by someone who, finally, understood that the past doesn't need to be erased for the future to be possible. It just needs to be forgiven and included, because within it lies the seed of what you can still become. It's not always the absence of fear that makes us move forward. Often it's precisely fear that walks beside us when we decide to take the first step. Fear walks alongside. It doesn't scream, but it breathes down our neck, trying to convince us that it's better to wait a little longer. Another year, another excuse. But there comes a time when waiting also hurts. It hurts because the body ages, but the soul still pulses, still asks, still whispers in the middle of the night, "There's still time." And that's when true courage appears, not as brute strength, but as a gentle breath in the middle of the chest, saying, "Go anyway," with trembling hands, with doubts in your pocket, with your heart beating out of rhythm. Because those who start after 60 aren't starting late, they're starting clean, without the weight of pleasing, without the rush to prove, without the illusion that it needs to be perfect. They start with wisdom. They start with scars. They start with the kind of truth that only those who have lived through a lot can carry. The road may be the same, but the eyes are different, more attentive, more serene, more grateful. Maturity doesn't take away the desire to start again. It just changes the direction of the desire. no longer seeking applause, but seeking meaning, no longer running out of vanity, but walking for peace. And in this new journey, all you need is one small first act, that gesture that might seem irrelevant to the world, but that inside of you transforms into a portal. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's signing up for something that inspires you. Maybe it's simply saying yes to what once seemed impossible. That small act is a key. And when you turn that key, life throws open doors you didn't even know existed, because courage doesn't live where fear doesn't exist. It lives exactly where fear once did. And still, you chose to go on. Sometimes, what changes your life isn't a big event. It's a simple moment, almost imperceptible, a moment no one sees, but that, inside, marks the beginning of something new. It seemed too late. Everything around you said, now it no longer makes sense. Age, the body, fear, memories, everything pointed to the end, or at least to giving up disguised as acceptance. But then something moves. A small choice, a new thought, a desire that escapes the exhaustion and touches your chest with the tenderness of someone who knows you completely. On that day, you didn't scream, didn't announce. You just tried again. And that gesture, silent, intimate, almost secret, was what changed everything. Because the world doesn't need to see for a life to be reborn. Sometimes, the only one who needs to see is you. You chose to start again without an audience, without promising anything to anyone, without the obligation to succeed, just with the desire to live something true. And that desire is a seed. It's a root. It's new ground for a path that has yet to be walked. The silent decision not to give up is stronger than any plan, because it's born from deep within the soul. And when it comes from there, no one can take it away. You can if you want. Mark this day as a rebirth. No need for a party, nor fancy words. Just a symbolic gesture, lighting a candle, writing a phrase on the mirror, planting something small in the backyard or in a pot in the lounge. Anything that says, from here, I choose to live. And if no one notices, that's okay. The most powerful time is the one you choose to live now. Not the one that has passed, nor the one to come, but the time you are creating with your choice to exist, with presence, with wholeness, with the quiet courage of someone who still believes. You still have time, real time, your time, time that doesn't need permission to begin. It's hard to believe that, after so many gray days, after so many pauses, so many departures, so many I'll deal with it later, that turned into never. But time isn't just what the clock marks. True time is what pulses when you choose to live with intention. It doesn't matter if the world didn't applaud your attempts, if no one saw your pain, if your story was marked by interruptions, delays, silences that no one knew how to name. You still have time. Time to start over, not as someone who erases the past, but as someone who transforms it into a path. What seemed too late might be exactly the right time, because maybe you weren't ready before. Maybe it was necessary to lose some things to find others that really matter. Life hasn't ended, but maybe the time for postponing has. Now is the time to be whole, to make peace with who you were, to embrace who you've become, and to allow that, from here on, your story is told with more truth and less fear. It doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. So if today you felt something awaken inside, a breath, a lump in your throat, a memory that returned, don't ignore it. Maybe it's the call you've been waiting for. Maybe it's the beginning of your day that changes everything. And if it is, let it come. Take a deep breath. Feel the ground beneath you. And remember, you still have time. Time to be the one who's been waiting for you all these years. Time to see yourself with your own eyes, not through the judgment of others. Time to begin with courage, with kindness, with soul. Now it's up to you. If this video touched you, don't keep it just for yourself. Share it with someone you feel needs to hear this. Maybe, for that person, you will be exactly the simple gesture that reignites hope.